credit to the NBA and Commissioner Adam Silver. I'm not the biggest change guy all the time. I do think we're changing a lot of things a lot. When the in-season tournament was first announced, my biggest thing is always, well, what are we doing? We're just creating a new television product, which in a way is kind of what it is. But then once I looked into it, and once I talked to somebody from the league about it, it was kind of explained to me. I was like, oh, okay, so these are just going to be regular season games with different things attached to them, and then we're going to kind of figure it out. And it's worked. Last night's games were incredible. That the energy in Sacramento for that comeback win against Golden State, like I just don't know that we would get that in late November in a normal regular season game. So credit to that. And also, I think the best part is that then once we see it play out in Vegas with the tournament and then a champion, then you'll know the next year's what it actually is. Now, granted, a lot of this is extra television product, whether it's the play-in game or the expansion of the college football playoff or the expansion of the extra team in the NFL and all that stuff. So sometimes when it's like, hey, everybody gets in, why aren't you more into this? It's like, well, I think really we're just rooting for more television revenue. But in the case of how the players have responded, I'm actually a little shocked that it felt like playoff basketball as much as it has throughout. And the courts and the uniforms and all that different stuff. I don't know if we can make fun of the Heat culture jersey yet. I'm ready to, as much as I respect Heat culture. I just had to give in. I had to bend the knee during the playoffs last year. But I do think there'll be a moment, maybe 3 years from now, where we're like, remember that jersey that actually said Heat culture? I'm ready to do it. I just don't know that I want to do it yet publicly. So, a lot of credit for a league that, at times I'll be as frustrated as you are about some things that happen. And I'm like, what's going on there? These games were great. The only win for the Warriors is that there will be no Chris Paul in-season tournament championship ring jokes to be made, because they had to win by 12 with the point differential. They were up 24 and they lost. So, let's start with that game, and then I'll get to a couple of the others. So Sacramento erasing that lead. I was wondering if they were going to celebrate an 11-point loss that would have gotten them into the in-season tournament, how that was going to play out. When Draymond got the technical, I was like, what would be funnier than if Golden State wins by 11 and the technical was the 1 point that was the difference? After the 16 finals, in a weird way, I was like, that'll be another addition to the resume. The comeback happened. Really, it wasn't the third quarter, even though Sacramento took 20 free throws. I mean, part of it, yes, was the third quarter, but you thought like, okay, in the fourth quarter, Golden State still being up. And by the way, and I don't even know what I'm talking about. Am I talking about the comeback to get into the tournament or the comeback to actually get the win? But the 20 free throws in the third quarter are a point of contention for Warriors fans. But look, man, Golden State fouls. They just do. And despite Golden State still playing well enough offensively in the third, I thought it carried over to the fourth, where a Golden State team with the guys with really accomplished resumes started acting like a bunch of lottery picks who hadn't done anything and complaining the entire game. And it took them kind of out of what they wanted to do. But I'm not trying to discredit Sacramento, because their guards, at least Golden State's guards, once Chris Paul is out, once Gary Payton is out, the guards to just get to the lane whenever they wanted to. The funny thing is Sacramento, who I don't think I can take seriously enough to get out of the West. Okay, if we're talking about the teams that actually can get out of the West and play in NBA Finals, I'm not there with Sacramento because I still don't think they have enough size. You are going to have size options to get through Denver. You just are. And we'll get to Minnesota and everything else. And, maybe even Phoenix a little bit, but I'm still not sure. That's why when you looked at Golden State and Los Angeles last year in the playoffs, you go, look, this is an awful matchup for the Warriors. They just, whenever LeBron or AD want to be right at the rim, they're just going to be right at the rim. There's not enough size. It can't just be Kevon Looney. They need somebody else. And right now for them, that's Saric. So having said all of those things about concerns about how Sacramento will match up with specific teams in the West, Sacramento last night was too big for Golden State. So that's not something Sacramento gets to say very often. So the meltdown continues late. The other thing that I thought Sacramento did a great job with was late in the game, knowing that there's no Chris Paul outlet, they started trapping Curry. And a lot of times when you start to trap Curry, really if you try to trap anybody multiple possessions. Like I saw it the other night with Halliburton where the other team was like, we're just going to send 2 at you. And it's like, you might get him for a possession, but normally you end up exposing yourself to a really easy basket on the other end. But Sasha, the 6'8" beast, was part of the trap, and it just kept working. And it was taking Curry out of, God mode of getting back into this game. So Sacramento's 10-6 now, 6th seed in the West. I've already talked about the size differential here. The weird thing that's also happening with them with that 10-6 record is, the point differential isn't very good on the season, but they're also 12th in offense. They were number 1 last year. The defense has improved from 24th to 17th so far, but that offensive number is dipped. I know Keegan Murray's had his issues, and he did not play last night. I don't think he's going to shoot 20% from 3. Because he's not asked to do a lot. Like, he has a very low stress offensive role for this team. So I'm not going to worry about that all that much. Now, Kerr after the game talked about turnovers and fouls. They had 20 turnovers for Golden State. Again, Sacramento took 42 free throws. But again, Golden State fouls. So you can't just point to that and say, well, that's why the officiating. But Draymond wanted to. When you look at some of the free throw numbers here and Kerr saying we need to be better with it. Okay, well, Golden State's 27th Golden State allows 27 free throw attempts per game by the opponent. That's 28th in the NBA. The only teams worse than them are the Pacers and the Pistons. They're 26th in turnovers per game. So when it occurs like it has to get better, it's not going to get better. Last season, they were the league worst team at almost 16 turnovers per game, and they were 25th in free throw attempts allowed per game at like 25. So they're actually allowing 2 more, but they were just as bad when you start looking at where they were ranking-wise with other teams. The turnover thing has always been part of their identity, but they used to just be so awesome it didn't matter. In 17-18, one of their championship years, they were 26th in turnovers per game, and 15-16, when they won all of the games and lost in the finals, they were 25th that year. But they were great. They were filthy. Those are arguably the greatest teams in NBA history, or at least in the conversation. The 17-18, that's my pick. And they could turn the ball over all day because it just didn't matter because they were also awesome defensively on top of what was the most absurd collection of scores in a starting 5. So they can't do that anymore, and this is the same thing as last year. But even with the free throw stuff, hold on to a 4-point lead. This reminded me of the Utah loss last year where I changed the channel. As I was going through the night of games, I'm like, okay, they got this one. Let me get on to a different game. And then I remember, I don't know, a minute or two later, I'm like, wait, they lost to the Jazz? Like, what happened? There was a bad inbounds. Well, it felt a lot like last night because even as you're about to blow the lead, even as it's clear that Sacramento's going to keep it close enough to move on, to see Curry get double teamed in the backcourt and then Draymond's late to recognize it, that's a turnover on the pass. And then there's a Draymond turnover where Klay cuts the wrong way. And the Klay stuff is real. I understand he's prideful. I'm a Klay fan, but it's just not, he's not there. And I don't know if it's coming back. He's 40% from the floor overall, career worst, 36% from 3. And there's just some movement stuff with him. Like, I'm not expecting him to be peak athletic Klay. That guy's never coming back. But some of the benching stuff I think is absurd because now with the injuries and the uncertainty of the health of some of the other wings around him, I'm not quite sure. Maybe they bring Moody back, but Kerr didn't want to do it. Kerr also had an awful, like one of the all-time awful challenges on the Curry kickout thing at 3, which Curry does now more, I'd say the last couple years than some of the other guys used to live with it. Like Curry's trying to do it a little bit more, getting the leg out there and getting that foul, but you shouldn't challenge that one. And you lose the timeout on that challenge, a timeout they could have used when they were trapped in the backcourt and Curry didn't know what to do because none of his teammates were paying attention. That was a colossal meltdown by everybody involved with the Warriors. They're 8-10. And, there's another Draymond part of it too, where Draymond comes back after the suspension. He's mad when he got elbowed on the baseline. I think he embellished it. He got elbowed, but he stayed down. Like, I was like, man, is he going to come up with like a face full of blood? Nope. He's still mad about it, so he wants to get a technical. He gets one on arguing a carry call during a time stoppage. Well, the carry call that wasn't called, but whatever. Everybody carries the whole fucking game. And then he decides to like just rough up Harrison Barnes at midcourt. and gets the foul and was somehow like psyched about it. It was like, what, you just gave him a cheap foul. Like what all you're doing is fouling in the second half. Why would you want to do it again? It was just because he was mad. He just wanted to be mad and have everybody see how mad he was. And then he stared down the official, which I kind of can't believe he didn't get ejected. Jeff Van Gundy nailed this years ago. He was like, the threshold for what refs put up with Draymond is so far beyond any other player in the league. If almost any other player, other than LeBron or like the elite of the elite with the guys with enough cachet, were to stare down the official after he already got the technical the way he did. And Draymond, I think, at least knew a little bit where he's like, let me get away from this. Let me actually turn away. Let me stare at him, let him know how I feel, but I'll turn away. I'm not going to go too long with this. It's funny because Draymond thinks everyone's out to get him. You could argue he's the most protected player, the way he's officiated and the leash that he's given throughout the course of a game. But as all of this is happening, you're still blowing the lead and you're making a ton of mistakes. And now Sacramento moves on. So congrats to the Kings.